Lake Haven had always been the heart of summer life in the small town of Willow Creek. Its crystal-clear waters sparkled under the sun, drawing families and vacationers to its shores. Children played on the sandy beaches, teenagers skipped stones, and couples took romantic paddleboat rides. To outsiders, it was a picture-perfect retreat. But the locals whispered a darker story. Over the decades, dozens of swimmers had vanished, their bodies never recovered. Some claimed the lake was bottomless, hiding dangerous currents that dragged people into its depths. Others spoke of a curse, a sinister presence beneath the surface. These tales, passed down through generations, were enough to keep most residents on the shore. But for the Johnson family, newcomers to Willow Creek, the lake was simply a picturesque backdrop to their summer vacation. The Johnsons arrived in late June, eager to escape the noise of city life. The cabin they rented sat on a quiet stretch of the lake, surrounded by towering pines and wildflowers. For Ben, a curious 16-year-old, and his 10-year-old sister Ellie, it was a dream come true. Their parents, Karen and Tom, looked forward to lazy afternoons and evenings around the fire. The lake promised peace, a chance to reconnect as a family. At first, it delivered. The days were filled with laughter and exploration. Ellie spent hours collecting smooth stones along the shore, while Ben took to fishing off the dock. Karen and Tom relaxed on the porch, the scent of pine mingling with the gentle lapping of the water. But beneath the idyllic surface, something stirred. Ellie was the first to notice. While wading in the shallows one afternoon, she saw a shadow dart beneath her feet. Startled, she backed away, calling for Ben. "It's just a fish," he said with a grin, tossing a rock into the water. But Ellie wasn't convinced. The shadow had moved too quickly, too deliberately, as though it were watching her. That night, as the family gathered around the fire, Ellie shared her unease. "There's something in the lake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw it." "Probably a trout," Tom said, brushing it off. "This lake's full of them." Ellie frowned but said nothing more. She wanted to believe her father was right, but as she lay in bed, the image of the shadow haunted her. She drifted off to sleep, only to wake with a start hours later. From her window, she could see the lake, its surface shimmering under the moonlight. But something was wrong. The water rippled unnaturally, as though disturbed by unseen hands. And then she saw them, dark shapes rising, just barely breaking the surface before vanishing again. The next morning, Ellie's mood was somber. She refused to go near the water, staying close to the cabin while the others enjoyed the lake. Ben teased her, but she didn't care. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her fears were validated that evening when she ventured to the dock to retrieve her forgotten sandals. The lake was calm, the air still. But as she bent to pick them up, something icy wrapped around her ankle. Ellie screamed, her body yanked toward the edge. She clung to the dock, her fingers digging into the wood as an unseen force tried to drag her into the water. Ben, hearing her cries, raced to her side and pulled her free. Ellie's leg bore deep bruises, shaped like skeletal fingers. "What the hell was that?" Ben muttered, staring at the lake. It was as if the water had returned to normal, its surface serene and undisturbed. Terrified but determined, Ben decided to investigate. The next day, while his parents took Ellie into town to see a doctor, he headed to the local library. What he found chilled him to the core. Old newspaper clippings detailed the disappearances at Lake Haven, some dating back over a century. The articles mentioned strange occurrences, whispers of a curse, and sightings of shadows beneath the water. One account stood out, a diary entry from a survivor who had narrowly escaped drowning. She wrote of hands pulling her under, cold and relentless, and voices calling her name. Ben shared his findings with Ellie that night. "It's not just you," he said, his voice trembling. Something's down there." The siblings decided to tell their parents, but Karen and Tom were skeptical. "You've been reading too many ghost stories," Karen said, though her tone betrayed a hint of worry. Tom agreed to keep a closer eye on the lake but insisted there was nothing to fear. That night, the shadows returned. This time, they didn't stay in the water. Ben woke to the sound of splashing, followed by heavy footsteps on the dock. Peering out his window, he saw figures emerging from the lake. They moved unnaturally, their bodies dripping and distorted, as though they were struggling to maintain their form. One turned its head, and Ben's breath caught. Its face was a grotesque mix of bone and decayed flesh, its hollow eyes fixed on the cabin. He stumbled back, his heart racing. "Mom! Dad!" he shouted, waking the family. The figures were gone by the time they reached the window, but the dock was wet, puddles leading toward the shore. "We're leaving," Tom said, his voice firm. "First thing in the morning." But the lake had other plans. As dawn broke, they discovered their car wouldn't start. The phone lines were dead, their cell phones had no signal, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. Trapped, the family turned to Ben's research, hoping to find a way to appease the spirits. The diary mentioned an old ritual, one performed by the town's earliest settlers to keep the lake's wrath at bay. It required an offering, something of great personal value, to be cast into the water. Desperate, the family gathered what they could: Karen's wedding ring, Ben's favorite fishing rod, Ellie's beloved stuffed animal. Together, they approached the lake. The water was unnaturally still, the air thick with tension. One by one, they threw their offerings into the lake, each item swallowed by the depths. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the water began to churn violently, and the shadows appeared once more. This time, they didn't attack. Instead, they lingered, their forms flickering as if caught between worlds. A voice echoed from the lake, low and mournful. "Leave this place. Never return." The Johnsons didn't hesitate. They packed what they could carry and fled on foot, reaching the main road hours later. A passing truck driver offered them a ride to town, where they reported everything to the authorities. But when police investigated the cabin, they found no signs of the shadows or the ritual. The lake, as always, was calm and serene. The Johnsons never returned to Lake Haven, but they carried the scars of that summer with them. Ellie refused to go near water, even swimming pools. Ben became obsessed with uncovering the truth, devoting his life to studying the paranormal. Karen and Tom, once avid travelers, chose the safety of home over any vacation. And the lake. It remained quiet and unassuming, waiting for its next visitors. For beneath its surface, the shadows stirred, hungry and patient, ready to claim their next victims.